Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, as you like, as you like. It's my honor to meet QustomDot. Igor, is there anything you'd like to say to set us up before we start, or should I just begin?
Yeah, maybe just a few words. Hopefully it's already there. Yeah. Hopefully here. Yeah, so we are having a last team member joining. It was a bit delayed in the train. We have a winner here who guessed the special guest. We kept your name in secret for the keynote. I'm not sure who first came up with that. I heard Peter and Hugo talking about that. So you won a present. I hope you guys will enjoy this keynote, and we'll have some time after that to discuss it. Let's start. Joy, please start.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The product you're developing, if it continues to be successful, it applies to every industry, as you know, applies to every industry. What QustomDot aspires to do is absolutely exciting to me, and it sounds like it's exciting to many of you too. Well, who am I? Why am I here? I'm Joe Justice. I worked with Bill Gates. I did an Agile project management. I was something called a Scrum Master for Bill Gates. I worked directly with Bill. And Bill would start every single meeting the same way. How much of this can we do in parallel? How much of this could we do at the same time? That, I think, is actually Bill Gates' genius. Maybe some of you worked in Microsoft. I did for a little while. Microsoft is split into hundreds of divisions. Each one doesn't have to wait on the other one. And Microsoft is structured so there are few central teams. There are a few, but there are few, because central teams, you have to wait in line for them. Instead, the Microsoft Office team can release completely independently from Microsoft Excel. For example, Microsoft Office creates a package, and whatever version of Excel is ready, ships when Office says they're ready to ship. Word is completely independent from Excel. They have shared libraries, but they can use them separately at any time. This was Bill Gates' genius, I think, parallel execution. QustomDot has now about 14 people. Ideally, I hope that means some parallel executable teams, I hope. Then I went on to work for Jeff Bezos at Amazon. And Jeff Bezos added to that. Jeff said teams shouldn't be bigger than 5 people. That surprised a lot of people. Jeff Bezos called them 2 pizza teams. He said never even have a meeting where 2 pizzas couldn't feed the entire group. Now I've heard QustomDot is already dividing into teams, probably for similar reasons. What Jeff Bezos taught us is if a team has more than 5 people, human nature, we try to elect a leader. There's 2 problems with leaders from Jeff Bezos' perspective. One, they usually want you to pay them more. They cost more. And 2, then everybody else waits on the leader to make the decision. It slows everybody down. I know it's a standard model to have a leader. It's actually slower, according to Jeff Bezos. So Jeff Bezos said, let's avoid leaders. Let's make sure teams don't get bigger than 5 people. Then they can collaboratively make decisions together. Even junior people can explain their opinions and learn, and senior people can explain their opinions and learn, instead of just having a leader make the decision. And that speeds up Amazon. Amazon has more than 3,000 teams now, most of them without leaders, for that reason. Then I went to work for Elon Musk. So yeah, I've had a super lucky career. This is why I get to talk to you today. Thank you very much. I've worked for Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. I mean, I've done some interesting things myself, but who I've worked with is maybe a lot cooler than who I am. And what I really want to talk to you about today is how Elon Musk works, because I've never seen anything so fast in my life. In the US, I've worked with the Special Forces, the Navy, and the Air Force. I've worked with the US Army. And I've worked on the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. That's the most expensive piece of hardware humans have ever made. I also worked on the F-22 Joint Strike Fighter, its predecessor. In Europe, I worked with Saab Aeronautics on the Gripen, a joint multi-role strike fighter, also with stealth capabilities. I've worked on black projects that I don't get to talk about with undefined budgets. Basically, they print money. I have still never seen anything faster than what I've seen working for Elon Musk, ever. I was blown away by the speed working in a Musk company. And I'm not saying QustomDot needs or even wants to become a Musk company or work that way. But I do want to show you some of the fast things about it. I think it's super exciting. Can anybody see something that says Agile hardware development? Okay, thanks. I made a 12-step program to reinforce the culture in Tesla. And I also spent some time with SpaceX, but I was primarily at Tesla. I operated the Agile program at Tesla for Elon Musk. I left Tesla, I retired in 2020, and I was given permission to teach this outside Tesla. So I do now. This is what I do now for fun and to earn a living, is I teach a 12-step program for companies to become more like a Musk company if they wanted to. And I'd like to show you an overview of it. It's an 8-hour course, so we're not going to do the whole thing right now, but I'll try to pull out some pieces that might be fun and maybe valuable for QustomDot. So first, in the course, we track our work the same way most projects in Tesla do. We use what's called a Kanban board. It's super simple. Like that's it. That's mostly how we track our work. We have a to-do column, a doing column, and then a done column. And that's it. We pull work across. In fact, many of the teams in Tesla only have a doing column. They actually don't care what's coming next because they'll learn so much by doing what they are doing that they'll make something new by the time they finish whatever's in the doing column. So many teams in Tesla only have a doing column. For a more simple introduction in the course, I use 3 columns: to do, doing, and done. But honestly, most teams in Tesla use just a doing column. Then we start with how Tesla launches teams. Tesla's complete onboarding for the entire company is 4 hours long. Most companies have 2 or 10 days of training, most big companies anyway, and Tesla has 110,000 employees and 500,000 suppliers. Most big companies have 2 or 10 days of training. Tesla doesn't. They have 4 hours. Well, what's the most important? What would you cover in 4 hours? In those 4 hours, Tesla says we have high standards. If you're the type of person that waits for manager feedback to find out what our standards are, you're probably not going to fit in Tesla. We need people that create their own high standards and hold themselves to it. In Tesla, you don't actually have a manager. There's no hierarchy. It's flat. Elon works in the factory, programming C++, embedded C, and Python primarily, programming robots, production robots, actually putting metal into robots, putting plastic and metal into robots. Elon does that. He physically works in the factory and fixing what's broken. Oftentimes in factories, load lifts, basically big elevators, jam. It actually happens a lot, and that's extremely expensive. Elon will join the group trying to fix those. That's very inspiring as a leader. Elon works 12 hours a day or more in the factory every day at Tesla or SpaceX. It's a flat company. If you want to talk to Elon, you just go talk to Elon. And you can message Elon. It's iMessage or Signal. We don't use email that much. It's a little too slow. It's an extremely fast-paced culture, and Elon is right there. You don't have a manager. You don't get manager feedback. There's no annual review. You just work. You work really intensely, and it's super fast. As a result, there's a culture of high trust. Because you don't have a manager, if you let people that have bad behavior stay in the company, it would be demotivating to everybody. So if someone breaks trust, they actively do something bad intentionally, they're removed from the company right away. Elon calls this doing your chores. He says nobody likes to do it, but you have to do your chores every day. So there's 110,000 employees in Tesla. Just statistically, every day someone is evil. There's at least one evil person every day out of 110,000. Elon needs to find them and ask them to leave the company. Does that every day, he calls it doing his chores. What that means is everyone who's still in the company is in general acting politely and with respect. So you end up having an extreme high trust environment. I know I sounded dangerous. Someone's getting fired every day. Yeah, it's because they're a known bad actor. A lot of companies have someone who doesn't work, that just doesn't get fired, or someone who actively sabotages other people's work and they don't get fired. That's what creates a low trust environment, because you know they're tolerated because they're like friends of the founder or something. That doesn't fly in SpaceX or Tesla. The next item in the 4-hour onboarding is communication. And what the handbook says when you start your training at Tesla is you're not going to get any communication. You're going to need to walk into the factory. Let me be clear. Most companies have a lab where new products are developed. And then they have another office building where software is written, and another office building where decisions are made. And then they have a factory where product is physically made. Tesla and SpaceX don't work that way. They just have factories. New product development is made in the factory on the same machines as production. They actually take turns making prototypes and making production parts. Same machines, not even separate machines. Software is written in the factory, sitting on the floor with a laptop. There aren't many chairs. People sit in circles on the concrete floor and write software. Decisions are made in the factory. There are just factories. There are many buildings in Tesla, but there aren't office buildings. They're factories. So that means your communication is looking at production and thinking, what do I need to invent so that production runs better? So that production is higher value or faster or lower cost. And that's what triggers design and new product development, which also happens in the factory. Goals and feedback, you're not going to get any. There's no annual goals. There's no feedback. I mean, people will try to help each other, but you can't wait for feedback. It's not going to come. You have to try to just work hard every day on something valuable. Safety. Safety is top priority. If you accidentally do something unsafe, everyone's going to help you. Everyone is going to try to assist you, educate you, help you remove the safety problem. If you intentionally do something unsafe, you'll be fired immediately. They can't tolerate intentional bad actors, as mentioned before. Attendance, tardiness, sick days, vacation, it's all fine. If you're late, it's fine. Let somebody know so no one has to wait on you. Maybe you got in a car accident, maybe your car doesn't start, maybe you're sick, maybe your kids are sick, maybe your spouse is sick, maybe you're planning vacation, super fine. You can be late, no problem. But if you ever don't show up and don't call, that means probably people are waiting on you, because most of the work is done in group work. Most of the deep research is done using what's called a mob, a group of 5, 4, or 3 people. I'll show some of that later. You rarely work alone, just because it's faster to work as a group. It's good to have a mix of senior people and junior people in a group taking turns. It maximizes speed. I'll show that later. So because of that, people are probably waiting on you if you don't show up. So if you don't call to say, don't wait on me, it's a very expensive problem to have several people waiting on you. They can't tolerate that. So if you don't show up and don't call, and you don't have a really good reason for it, you will be fired immediately. That's grounds for immediate dismissal. I don't mean to sound like the company's so severe. It's that really bad behavior is not tolerated. So the people who are in the company tend to exhibit good behavior most of the time. And that actually makes a really healthy, high trust work environment. Outside employment is explicitly allowed. Tesla is pretty unusual like this. Some of us remember in 2016, Tesla open sourced most of their patents. Wow. They said, it doesn't matter if Mercedes-Benz makes a lot of electric cars, or BMW, or Toyota, or Skoda, or Renault, or Tesla. What's important is that there are a lot of electric cars, no matter who makes them. So Tesla open sourced most of their patents, saying competitors have them. Please make great electric cars. The problem is the competitors didn't in 2016. They didn't make electric cars. They didn't even use the patents that were handed to them. So Tesla has had to increase in scale. But the point I'm trying to make here is outside employment is explicitly allowed. If you can help a competitor make better electric cars, that's encouraged. It's a pretty unusual company that way. Okay, stupid stuff. In orientation, we're told we're not going to list what stupid things are. You need to figure that out on your own. If you accidentally do stupid things, everyone's going to support you. If you intentionally do stupid things, you're going to be fired immediately. This is not a company that tolerates people who do stupid things on purpose. And we're not even going to list what those stupid things are. Like, you have to figure it out. Be an adult. Fun. If there's anything you can do to increase the fun of your work environment that doesn't slow you down or increase risk, do it immediately. Some of you attended the opening of Giga Berlin, Giga Brandenburg, or at least some of you saw it on the internet. There were lasers, smoke, beer. There were DJs, dance music. There were 10-meter tall Mylar dancing puppets. It's pretty similar inside the factory too. It is a wild party all the time. Yeah, it's a really intense work environment. It's also really fun. I think that's important for people to work that hard at a continued pace. It's got to be super fun. And it is. Resolving concerns. You have someone you can message anytime if you have a concern. And you can go talk to them, or you can send them an email. Most of the time it's iMessage. As mentioned, the majority of the communication in the Musk companies is iMessage or Signal if you're an Android user. That's an encrypted chat. Here's the reason why. If you're writing Python or embedded C, or if you're programming a robotics assembly step, or if you're talking to a supplier and you switch to type an email or read email, it changes your whole context. You kind of dive into email and it ruins your train of thought, your thinking. But quickly responding to a message on your phone has less of a disruption in your mental flow. Elon Musk calls it context switching is the mind killer. Even messaging slows you down, but much less than email. Many of the people I worked with in Tesla did not even know what their email address was. They had never checked it. Most communication is iMessage or Signal because it's faster, it's shorter. It's less of an interruption. Okay, that's as much as I wanted to talk about how teams are launched. So we've talked about step 1 of the 12-step program. I'll try to give a summary of most of the steps and how it might relate to QustomDot. Second is the priority is on speed of innovation over all else. I'm not saying you need to be a Musk company or work like Elon's working with you. I'm not sure that's the goal. But what I do want to say is I've never seen faster innovation, and you are an innovation company. You are a product innovation company working to make more and more reliable and capable prototypes to onboard and get customers excited and sign deals. That is something I think you can learn from Tesla. They're really good at that. I'd like to say how good they are at that. Here's the first set of product releases at SpaceX. In a way, you're kind of like SpaceX. You're trying to do something people have never done before. SpaceX, it was reusable rockets and the lowest cost per kilogram in low Earth orbit. For you, it's groundbreaking displays at the pixel level and the chemistry inside it. For SpaceX, their first product release took 2 years. Yeah, they wish they could have gone faster, but you know what? What they were doing was complicated, like you. It took 2 years for one release, but then they did. And then it took 2 more years before they made it significantly better. And then 2 more years. But then it only took 1 year. After every product release, they had a meeting called a retrospective to say, how are we going to make the next product release faster, more fun, higher quality, less expensive? And it didn't always work. As you can see, the first 4 all took 2 years, but they had tried something to be faster. By the 5th release, it worked. They did it in half the time. They invented some custom machinery that helped them experiment more quickly and make production units more quickly. And we can talk about what that was if we have time. The next one also took a year, and then a year, and then a year. That was back in 2016. SpaceX has been at this for 17 years now. SpaceX is now on 2-day product releases. It took them 17 years to get there, but now it's 2 days. They can design, build, test fire, and install on a rocket a new designed Raptor engine every 2 days. No 2 Raptor engines have ever been made the same. They're all different alloys, different bell shapes, different cooling hoses, different embedded software, different combustion chamber shapes, different ablation chemicals inside the combustion chamber. They are fully unique, every single one. And SpaceX now, it took them 17 years to get there, but now 2 days. Now, an entire rocket takes longer. A Starship, that's Falcon series landing themselves. Here's some Starships. A Starship takes a month. Starship uses 27 Raptor engines, and an entire Starship takes 1 month. That's still super fast. But I'd like to make a point about interfaces. Not every aspect is that fast. I mean, SpaceX has a lot of money now, but they still don't have unlimited money. Like QustomDot, you've got to be careful where you spend your money. So Booster is now on Booster 7. This picture is a little old. Booster plugs into the bottom of Starship. It's like first stage and second stage, but they're made at totally different speeds. A new Starship is made every month. A new booster is made about every 5 months. And every Starship is different, and every booster is different, but the interface remains the same. That's important in hardware and software too. In software, we call it an API, application programming interface. You can change the software on either side of the API, but as long as the API stays consistent or at least adaptable or backwards compatible, you don't have to stay in sync across teams. That enables faster development. It's the same in hardware. If you introduce something like a USB-C connector between pieces of hardware, like that, an interface, then as long as both modules implement the USB-C interface or are backwards compatible with it, you can have completely separate cadences. It's totally fine. This enables greater speed. That's what SpaceX does. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than USB-C, but they keep a stable backwards compatible interface. And that enables massive parallel concurrent development. Here's the teams executing at the same time in SpaceX. I don't mean to rush. I just want to show us a lot of cool stuff, I hope, before we run out of time. Now that does change the way we budget. I don't know how QustomDot budgets, but I'd like to show you how Tesla and SpaceX budget. Most companies use a greater than 1 year long budget. We call that waterfall. General Motors uses it. The Volkswagen Group uses it, including Porsche and Lamborghini inside the Volkswagen Group. Honda and Sony use it. What that means, though, is if you have a good idea of something different, you have to wait until the next budget cycle or politically request a variance in budget. So it slows down innovation. Waterfall is actually a good thing. Greater than 1 year budgets are actually a good thing. But in exchange, the rate of innovation slows down. Essentially, your rate of significant innovation is blocked by the rate at which you reallocate capital, at which you budget. So what a lot of big companies do is to get faster innovation, they introduce something called scaled agile framework. And what that does is it tries to split a company's big budget into quarters. They have a meeting called big room planning and these multiple team events called trains, and they group the trains into quarterly release budgets. For a big company, quarterly budgets is actually pretty fast. If they get good enough that they can do that, companies then do something called Scrum. Scrum has less than 30-day long budgets. We call them sprints. and we introduce a financial owner called a product owner. It's their job to decide what the next 30-day budget or less should be. They call that the product backlog. It's a list of the next releases. This is actually a pretty good place to be. That's fairly competitive in terms of speed with most of the world. I mean, trying to get real meaningful hardware and software done in less than 30 days is awesome. Yes, some companies are even faster than that, but you're in pretty rare territory if you can get to 30 days or less. That'd be my wish for QustomDot. Releasable, sellable in prototype, or at least demoable hardware and software on 30-day or less chunks. That'd be amazing. But some companies are even faster than that. They use real-time budgets. That's what we call agile, flexible budgets, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale. As soon as the R&D teams learn something by building and they have a new cooler idea, we can immediately reallocate capital to the new cool idea. That's what's called agile, and it's famous. It's difficult to do. You need a lot of automated testing. You need a lot of automated manufacturing, flexible automated manufacturing, not necessarily 3D printing, like traditional robots, but they can be reprogrammed each day. Then you can have flexible robots. And that brings us all the way up to Agile at Tesla. Now, this is the rarest territory. I've never seen other companies anywhere near this quick. So I'm not saying QustomDot, you have to do this tomorrow. It's super difficult, but I do want to show you what it is because it's cool. Tesla has an AI stack called AutoBidder. And it's not some magical superhuman AI. It's not that different than what you've probably already written for fun. It's a gradient descent algorithm with random reset to avoid local minima, like you've probably done for fun with basic Python. That's not the hard part. The harder part is the training data set it uses. The training data set is the open public market. Tesla sells energy back to public markets, to the power grid exchange, from Megapack, from their battery packs. That's an awesome training set. That's augmented by market data from selling Tesla insurance premiums back and forth. Now, Tesla has been aggregating this data set for years now, and it's really good and it's really clean. It's very well labeled. What they've done is they've trained their budgeting algorithm to automatically reallocate budgets multiple times a minute. Yes, the wealthiest automotive company in the world has no budgets at all. And finances are reallocated multiple times a minute by an app. I've never seen this anywhere else. I honestly don't think anyone else can compete. It is amazing. And here's the benefit of it. I mean, not just that it sounds interesting. Here's practically why that might be a good idea. As soon as anyone in Tesla has a neat and interesting, innovative idea, it can automatically be funded in less than a minute without waiting for any leadership decision. And this takes us to the next step. I'm going to skip. Digital self-management. In most companies, we wait on decisions like, should we build it this way or that way? The customer wants two different things. Which one should we make? Or two different possible lead customers have different needs. Which do we decide? Often, we wait for a leadership decision to make these tough decisions. What Tesla has done is one type of decision at a time, attempt to train an AI software stack. And these things are not perfect, but they're not bad. They're about as good as a manager. So you have a choice. You could wait on a manager, or you could get a similar level of quality answer instantaneously from an app. Again, these apps are not perfect, but they're pretty good. Their success rate is about as good as any of the human managers. So what Tesla does now is they say speed is more important. The quality is similar, and speed is very important. Speed has value. So never wait to ask another human. Don't ask another human for coaching. Don't ask another human for training. Don't ask another human for budget approval. Ask the app and act immediately independently. And so what you have are 110,000 people acting in small teams of 5 people or less, with automated approvals. These approvals are not perfect. I'm not saying Tesla has made the perfect AI. They haven't, but they've made a good enough AI that they've replaced all management. I mean, there are still people with management role for legal and compliance reasons, but they don't have any additional authority. They don't make any additional money, and no one waits on their feedback. That's the value. The last one is the value. Well, also the cost savings of not paying managers a higher salary. What happens is nearly 100% of the employees are engineers. And that's the goal. If you could do it, that's the most efficient way to run a company, where near 100% of headcount is directly working on the product or service at all times. That's what you wish you could do. And Tesla is very near that now, and SpaceX as well. It makes a phenomenally financially efficient company. As mentioned, that's what Elon's doing. Elon's not waiting to make decisions and looking at presentations. I never saw Elon watch a presentation or sit down in a meeting, ever. Elon is in the factories working in groups of 5, 4, 3, or occasionally 2 people. We call those mobs. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's good, but let's save some time. Yeah, that's good too. Okay, let's go here. Here's what Bill Gates was trying to teach me the whole time. And I think I learned it. Bill was a pretty good teacher. Waterfall companies have one big product work stream. It's a big plan up front, and you try not to change the plan. You analyze the plan, you build test mules, you build test prototypes, build manufacturing prototypes, you test those, you deploy to production, production has test deploys, and then production deploys to customers, etc. That's traditional development, hardware, software, product development. What Agile companies attempt to do, and what CustomDot I think is getting better and better at doing, is having frequent done releases. So these actually have to include testing. It's called the definition of done. Ideally, these things are short, but I mean, in the beginning, if they've got to be 2 years, like it was for SpaceX, then that's the time it takes. But we attempt to make them shorter and shorter and shorter. The important point is each of these steps include testing. So it's at least demo ready, if not customer ready at the end. We call that the definition of done. Some people call these sprints, that's fine. The point is each one includes design, build, test, deploy. They're a complete product development cycle. And you attempt to make it as short as you can. What Jeff Bezos added to that was small team size. 3 people would be the ideal team, but here's the problem. How do you go all the way through plan, build, test, deploy with only 3 people? Especially when you have a technically complex problem, like what CustomDot is building. How could you? So in the beginning, the teams might be bigger, maybe 14 people. But look at how complicated communication is when you have a team that big. So what Bezos insisted on is some level of cross-training. Not everyone is going to be the best. Not everyone has a PhD in everything. You're going to have someone who did their PhD in a very important discipline, and not everyone is going to easily be able to learn the necessary parts. But we can teach the basics of our research. We can teach the basics, what we do a few hours every day, may be teachable. The goal is to try to get to 5 people or less. That does mean everyone has at least 2 competencies. We call this T-shaped people or cross-training. Yeah, that's difficult, especially when we've spent our academic career differentiating ourselves from each other, finding the novelness of our research and exploiting the uniqueness of our research, our novel capabilities. The problem is, for speed of product development, you got to try to help someone else understand at least some of your deep expertise. And it doesn't mean you're any less valuable. It means your team is now faster and the company excels. So this is predicated on trying to learn at least one other skill. You won't be as deep as the other PhD, and they won't be as deep as you, but we learn to help each other. And this is a primary difference between fast product development and differentiating academic research. This is a key difference. So if we're going to be in a product development company, I will say it is absolutely paramount to start attempting to learn 2 skills. For example, if you're deep in the chemistry of the pixel, you would start to become deep, if you can, in the films that contain that chemistry, the substrates on the surface and behind, and the electrical stimulation and the backlighting. You would try to become more, we call it full stack. Full stack is the dream. I mean, it's really hard to do, but it's the highest form of new product development. Full stack means you have a functional capability. You can actually work on it. Doesn't mean you're the best, but you can work on every element in the system. That's the dream. Elon Musk is full stack, and not just at Tesla and battery technology and heat pumps and embedded software and artificial intelligence, also at SpaceX and reusable rocketry and metallurgy and material science, and also at Neuralink and embedded implantable computing and the protocols for communication through the human skull and the FDA approvals. Elon is full stack in multiple disciplines. How could that happen? I actually don't think Elon is necessarily a genius. Elon may be a genius, but here's what Elon does. Elon works in groups called mobs every day. It's the fastest way we've learned so far for anyone to become full stack. And it seems to be possible for most people. Here's how it works. In a mob, you have one person called the driver. The driver is the only one who types or moves the mouse or builds the thing. They're the one person who works. Then you have 4, 3, 2, or 1 people that cheers for them, tries to create good energy. And they give advice if they know, or they do research and they answer questions and they check for quality. We rotate the driver, so everyone plays driver in less than an hour. You don't want to rotate driver until whoever is the driver has felt success. And that depends on what you're doing. Sometimes that could be as fast as every 3 minutes. Sometimes it takes up to 10 minutes for the driver to get some success feeling, depending on the type of work we're trying to do. Now, a mob can be all novices. As long as one person has a guess of what we should try next, the mob can continue iterating and learning. And they learn by doing. I mean, you don't do anything in a mob except the real work. So this is how you train. So let's say one of the people in this mob has a deep PhD. They're not the first driver. You have 2, 3, 4, or other people that don't have a mastery of this work. And the driver is the only one allowed to type or move the mouse or do the work, whatever the work is. Program the robot, articulate the robot, talk to the supplier, whatever it is. The driver tries to do the work. Now, the person who has a good idea what to do, the PhD, gives them advice, and they try to do it in a kind and upbuilding way, because by definition, the person who's the driver is new. They try to be kind and upbuilding. And then we rotate every 10 minutes or less till everyone's the driver. It's really chaotic in the beginning. But when you do it at least 1 hour a day, at the end of a month, people have learned a tremendous amount about each other's disciplines. It doesn't mean they're all experts. They've learned a tremendous amount. Now, any given person could possibly take a vacation. They wouldn't be fully replaced, but people could try to continue the work. They have some idea of the work. And if you can survive doing that for a year, 1 hour or more a day of mob, maybe even 8 hours a day of mob, if you have tremendously high energy and great coffee, that is what makes a fast new product development company. That truly is the answer. Now, the problem is most experts prefer to work alone for many reasons. One, it's easier to think when you're alone. It's easier to picture things clearly, to imagine. 2, most deep experts have some level of shyness in one level or another, and it feels safer to be alone. And 3rd, most of us have been through academic training, and we're encouraged to find our uniqueness and further develop our uniqueness, which means protecting our uniqueness. So we've been trained in this and we're good at it. We're good at working alone or in small research groups, but then differentiating our piece, our contribution. The problem is, for new product development, that's not what you want. For new product development, you would want a completely different skill set, this mob skill set. And I get it. That is not comfortable, especially in the beginning. So yes, the goal is to mob all day. That is the goal. 8, 10, 12 hours a day. That is the goal. In the beginning, I would recommend try it at least an hour a day. Maybe that's already too much. People are already losing their mind after an hour. But that is the goal. And if you can get through it for a whole week, it might actually start to become fun. I mean, that's the goal. Work should be fun. Then we structure the product into modules like Bill Gates tried to teach me. The idea is these modules don't wait on each other. That's how you know you have a good modular split, where you can make a new release of a given module independently from any of the others. They just plug in like Lego pieces. It's like developing a new color of Lego. They still plug into each other the same way. That's the dream. And the closer the product architecture gets to that, to parallel execution, is what's called Justice's Law. That's one of the 3 things that's been named after me. You'll see one of the others later, right about before we're done. And it means the company structure, the teams that make the company, are simply the modules of your product. That's the lowest weighting structure we currently know. It's the fastest throughput structure we currently know for new product development. That's called Justice's Law. We might run a workshop just on modular splitting at some point if that becomes the most important for CustomDot. Or we could do a mob training or something. We saw digital self-management. Okay. A person in Seattle named Jim Benson is actually a hero of mine. Jim Benson developed a meeting structure to facilitate a meeting called Lean Coffee. Some of you may have used it. It's become world famous. It's all over the world now. It started in Seattle in around 2008. And I was in some of the first Lean Coffees, but I didn't create it. Jim Benson did. What Lean Coffee does is whoever shows up to a meeting, they propose topics they want to discuss or learn about with the people who are there. And then the group votes on the order of the topics. And then the group votes on, do they want to continue talking about the highest priority topic, or do they want to go on to the second topic? So the group determines the agenda, they determine the order, and then they determine how long to discuss it. Well, Tesla doesn't have many meetings, so Lean Coffee wouldn't help Tesla. But what Tesla does is prioritize the work, the actual physical work, the new product development, the experiments, the contractor conversations, the robot programming, the software programming. Tesla prioritizes the work, and the way they do it is almost exactly like Lean Coffee. The employees say, here's what we think we need to do today in order to release soon and with quality, in order to meet the definition of done soon. As soon as we can. I mean, ideally today, but however long is how long it takes. So the people show up each day and say, here's the work we think we need to do today to meet the definition of done soon. Let's vote on what we think the order is, and majority rules. It's a flat organization. We don't have like the lead researcher model who decides order. I mean, you want to ask that person, they're probably smart, but majority vote rules. Then the team votes on when they think a certain step is done enough to move on to the next step. And next day they repeat this process, and next day they repeat the process. This means the work changes every day by the vote of the people who are doing the work. And this is the second thing that's been named after me. It's called the Justice Board. It's the list of all open projects, all open work. There's a row for each thing we're spending money on. So if CustomDot has, for example, 4 parallel executing teams, there'd be 4 rows. Each row would have some kind of title, and it would change all the time. It might change more than one time a day what the title is. That's the current work item. And there'd be a guess at the value to CustomDot if that team is successful. So for example, we're trying to get the supplier for some of our digital inks to understand better what we really need. The last batch was non-functional. I don't know if you use digital inks. Sorry, I'm trying here. Or we're trying to get the backlighting to be more effective, or we're trying to develop a new substrate to encapsulate the new pixel. That goal changes as soon as that work is either blocked, we can't continue for now, we're in a wait state on a supplier or another team, or we finish, it meets the definition of done. So we could continue and get a higher level definition of done, or we could start on the next work item. This is called the Justice Board. So for example, the autopilot team in Tesla, their first value statement was the car can drive 10 meters and stop safely inside the factory. That was the first value statement. Okay. It's not terribly useful all by itself, but we learned a lot. The next value statement, the cars can drive themselves into the car wash. So before delivery, the cars can drive themselves into the car wash. The third value step, they replaced it, was the cars can drive themselves out of the car wash and onto the trucks, onto the delivery trucks. Now that actually had value, finally. That actually had logistics value. It streamlined factory production operations. And we're at our third value statement. Fourth value statement, the cars can complete one road legal test on their own. So the cars could go through one of the homologation tests on their own. Automated testing is super valuable. It means you can try more experiments and see if your experiments are trending to be a product you can actually sell, because you can't finish product development faster than you can approve it for sale. So Tesla then adds up the number of homologation tests that the cars can complete on their own until, and this was a very important moment for Tesla, the cars could certify themselves. And they do now. Each individual car is homologated individually. They're the only car company on planet Earth that does this right now. Most companies batch changes into 2.5-year increments called minor model changes every 2 to 3 years, and then major model changes every 5 to 7 years. Tesla doesn't do that. They have 60 new parts a day in production. That's the scope of a normal company's minor model change every 2 to 3 years. Tesla does that every day. What that means is if you and your neighbor both ordered a new Model 3 or Model Y, you might get different hardware, software, and chemistry in those cars ordered on the same day. This is Agile. You're not withholding change any longer than you need to. It's immediately deployed as fast as you can test and certify it as road legal. So that means the important step is to test and certify as road legal. So each car does that themselves. Instead of sending a 4,000-page certification document to the world's governments once every 2 to 3 years, Tesla sends a 1-page document per car saying, here's how I'm different than the last car. Would you please certify me? Here are my test results. Run actually in that car, because the cars put themselves through the road legal homologation tests and they upload that data to the government agencies. 1-page documents. I mean, they're digital, but they're essentially 1 page. And each car applies for approval and hopefully gets it. Well, now Autopilot's value statement, and this is the current value statement for Autopilot, is % safer than a human driver, divided by expense. So operational expense is total salary working on Autopilot, and CapEx is cubic meters of the factory used by that development team. That's the approximated expenses. And these are automated. No engineers fill in financial tracking sheets. You don't want engineers doing anything except engineering. So you don't have to ever fill in a timesheet or anything like that. These are automated. They're not perfect, but they're good enough so the engineers don't have to fill in any paperwork. So expenses are guessed as OPEX plus CapEx, operational expense plus capital expense, or basically salaries plus a cubic meter rental fee, like from the factory. And that's value divided by expense. And value now for Autopilot is per kilometer driven, how many accidents are reported. And of those, how many of those accidents was Autopilot engaged within the last few minutes? And how many of those accidents was Autopilot not engaged within the last few minutes? And here's the value trend for Tesla now. On the roads where Autopilot has the most training data, which are the roads that are closest to the factories, Autopilot is 3,200% safer than a human driver in terms of accidents per kilometer driven. So the value statement for the Autopilot team now is increasing that percentage and increasing the square meters of planet Earth where Autopilot can perform at that level. Because there's some roads where Tesla has no training data, and there's some roads where Tesla has very little training data. So the Autopilot's job now is to expand the square kilometers of Earth, of roadway, where autopilot can behave at this level of safety. And this is how the entire company prioritizes money. The top level of the Justice Board is how much money is in the company bank account. Every employee can see it. We call it runway. And every employee is asked, are we spending enough money? Tesla has a lot of money now, but 14 years ago, they were a tiny company. They were the same size as QustomDot. And they still measured this way. They said, here's how much tiny money we have. Are we spending enough? And the next question was, are we spending it efficiently? And each row on this board has a value formula that's proposed by the people on that team. And it doesn't mean it's perfect, but that's the number we attempt to use. So value divided by expenses creates the Justice Board, one row for project. And you want as few projects as possible because that creates focus. But you also don't want any project with more than 5 people on it at a team level. That's what Jeff Bezos taught us, right? So essentially you have a project for every 5 people or less. If QustomDot is around 15 people, you'd have around 3 projects. Or 1 project that's split into 3 parallel executing modules, which is probably pretty close to what you have. Okay, this does mean supplier contracts are different. We definitely don't order something for a year and say, please supply me the same thing for a year. The change rate is too fast. So you might have a year or even 10-year contract with a supplier. That's okay. But there's a clause that says, we expect to give you feedback every 1 week. And we expect for the next batch of parts every 1 week to incorporate that feedback. So we expect what you deliver to us will change at least a little bit every 1 week. That's an Agile supplier contract. We can practice those together if you need to. Now, production houses don't want change. They want one design that they manufacture forever. That's the easiest for them. That is what they want. So if you're going to start sending new designs to your suppliers or bring your manufacturing in-house and try to manufacture something different in short cycles, you do need to use now what's called extreme manufacturing. Extreme manufacturing is a list of 11 manufacturing practices that let you change what's being manufactured multiple times a day. Without this, the manufacturing group does not want your changes. They say, we just set up for the last version. We don't want to change. Don't give us any change. So there are 11 extreme manufacturing practices. I wrote a book on it. You can have the book if you want. It's in chapter 10. Last, there's a way to run a conference called open space technology. Some of you have done this before. Agile Lean Europe is run this way. Agile Testing Days is run this way. Some of you may have attended these conferences. What happens is the conference is a blank agenda, and whoever shows up to the conference, they propose agenda items, and then they say, I'll be in conference room A from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. talking about this topic. We're hoping people will teach me about this topic. If you're interested, please come to conference room A from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Other people propose other topics, and it makes an agenda for the day. Then they created something called the law of mobility. The law of mobility says you go to any session you want, you can come and go anytime. So if I host a session on extreme manufacturing in conference room A from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., it's perfectly okay if no one shows up. We have the law of mobility. And it's perfectly okay if some people come for 10 minutes and then leave. They have the law of mobility. So that's set as a ground rule. People can come and go at any time. I'm not saying QustomDot needs to host an open space conference, although you could. What I am saying is this is actually what it's like to work in a Musk company. You have these projects on the Justice Board. People come and go anytime. They have the law of mobility. And in fact, what those projects are on the Justice Board can change anytime. People can propose a new idea. And if it appears to be high enough value, it replaces the lower value items on the Justice Board. There's actually software that does that in Tesla, but for now, yeah, I'd recommend doing it by group vote, or maybe you have one of the 3 founders or the 3 founders decide, as long as they can decide in less than an hour, so there's not a lot of waiting. The idea is, ideally, people self-assign. Now, this is different than a manager pulling you off a project and you don't get to finish anything and you don't get to go deep. No one pulls you off or assigns you. You assign yourself. Your job is to maximize your contribution. And if you're not maximizing your contribution, you're spending 10 minutes on every project and you're not getting anything done, that's your failing. You're held accountable for that. So if you decide to stay on the same project for years, that's super fine. Andrej Karpathy is head of Tesla AI. Andrej Karpathy chooses to go to the Tesla AI projects almost every day. Not every day. Someday Andrej actually works with robots and builds stuff in the factory. But most days, Andrej Karpathy goes to Tesla AI in the factory and sits in a ring of laptops with other people interested in Tesla AI that day and works on Tesla AI. So you can go deep. You can do the same thing again and again and again. It's not like someone is telling you where to go. Your responsibility is to go where you're the highest value, and that may change. And that's called the law of mobility. All right, everybody. That's the fastest summary ever of the 12-step program, which brings us to game clear. If you wanted to, you could take the class. I teach this once a month on Europe class. You're super invited. You've got the summary, the overview of it. In the last few minutes, I'd like to find out if there are any comments or questions, and I'd like to thank you very much for your time.
Do you have access to this mirror board?
Sorry, one more time?
Would you have access to this mirror board?
Yeah, sure. If I gave you everything, it'd blow up my business model. No one would take the class. But I'll send an image of it that shows almost everything. You can't zoom in to the closest level. But yeah, I'll totally share a captured image of it. In fact, I'll attempt to email that to Igor within the next 30 minutes.
We should also have a video. We can scroll to that anyhow.
Yeah. Both are good.
I do have a small comment then. Actually, the last part that you were saying, sorry guys, but you said the importance of having less projects, but at the same time, when everyone can suggest their own project, how do you balance between having that a million of projects and having actually 3 projects only?
Right? Yeah. In Tesla, there's basically 2 products for that whole company of 110,000 people. There's Model 3 and Model Y, which are almost exactly the same product, and Model S and Model X, which are almost exactly the same product. So there's really 2 products in Tesla. SpaceX has 1. They're retiring the Falcon rocket series and they're moving entirely to Starship. They have a product. So there's hyper focus. Well, how is that focus maintained when anyone can propose a project? Projects are scored automatically by software, but however you need to do it, maybe the 3 founders score it, or maybe it's group vote, but projects are scored by value to the company mission. So the company does need some type of mission clarity, or else people couldn't propose projects that are on mission. But projects are scored by effect to the company mission, and only the highest alignment projects of all the proposed projects that day get funded basically automatically by the AI in Tesla's case, but in the case of QustomDot, funding as decided. So for example, I was co-captain of a race team at the Nürburgring, a very successful race team. It was called WikiSpeed. You can see WikiSpeed, a car behind me. I designed and built this car myself. I'd made 14 race cars. I was co-captain of a Nürburgring race team, and we won the 24 Hours of Nürburgring V6 class, not overall, but V6 class in 2014. So we competed at the top level of motorsport and we won. I was constantly proposing Tesla racing in Tesla. We'll get more engineering feedback. It'll be great marketing. We'll attract more engineering talent. I had all these reasons it was a good idea. It was always lower value to the mission than how do we improve the paint quality on the Model 3, right? Core engineering work. So my passion project, Tesla Rating, never got scored. It never made the cut. As passionate as I was, it never made the cut, because even I could clearly see improving paint quality on the Model 3 was higher value to the company. The fundamental engineering of the primary project is always higher value to the company. So we never got anywhere near Tesla racing, even though I loved it. So this type of scoring towards the company mission tends to make clear that hardcore production and quality engineering is always the first thing you get to do, and you basically never run out of that. So that's basically all you get to do.
I have another question.
Of course, please go ahead.
Does Tesla still have a separate R&D department from their production or not? Or is that all done in the same way?
There are groups, there are mobs that are doing R&D work. They're in the same building, and who's in that group changes. People use the law of mobility. So most companies have a separate R&D organization and R&D process, and often they even work in a different building. Tesla doesn't do that. It's the same building, but it is its own group. So there are mobs that are working on production, they're building, and there are mobs that are working on improving the thing, R&D. But who is on those teams actually goes back and forth. It's the same pool of people, and they're in the same building. But the teams tend to focus on either trying to build the same thing and make improvements to the production process, or engineering a new thing. Did I answer your question, or I just confuse it?
It's clear. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, most companies have a much more differentiation between R&D or new product development and production. Tesla has almost no difference, but there are typically different mobs. So you might spend the first 3 hours in a day helping some R&D groups, and then the last, well, Tesla does 12-hour shifts. So the last 9 hours in production. You don't have to do 12-hour shifts. Tesla does, but you don't have to. But yeah, you'd go back and forth between the same.
More question on the example you gave of the Raptor and the Booster, so they have different kind of timings. But so I understand it's also different modules, the interfaces are fixed, but then how does it look within one module? Like this one booster, so it takes 5 months. I assume there's also some then modularity within that group, or is it still one whole thing?
No, it's exactly as you said. They're daughter or child modules inside, right? So here, I'll zoom in. The graphic will help. It's what you said. You clearly understand the idea. So here's a starship. A starship is made out of barrel sections, which sound just like they're circles of steel. No, they've got embedded software, embedded cooling, embedded pressure vessels. They're complicated things. Every barrel section is unique. That's created by these barrel teams, and each one is an experiment to be lighter, cheaper, faster, higher heat dissipation. They're all unique. So you have a barrel team creating these submodules. Then you have a tank dome header and base team. These are child modules as well. And these are common across Starship and Booster. They consume those as if it's a supplier, but it's in company teams. So Starship is made out of these header and base tanks, again, with embedded electronics, embedded cooling, and embedded micropiping. They're not just hemispheres of metal. And then inside barrel sections, and then you have the Raptor engines, which we've talked about, which are all unique and actually absurdly complicated, the Raptor engines. And then you have avionics, etc. These are all child modules, which are largely shared. So when the team's making a barrel section or a tank header or footer, they don't care if Booster or Starship is going to use it. It's agnostic because of the interface. So the Starship team consumes child modules, Raptors, barrel sections, tank headers, tank bases, etc. Then you have the orbital launch mount team and the orbital launch table. These rockets are so big and so heavy, it actually causes liquefaction of the Earth. It makes the Earth start to behave as if it's floating on the ocean. So these are built more like boats with earthquake-style stabilization for the liquefaction events. So these are constantly being remade. every month to be different and try to handle the thrust differently as they essentially float in the earth during rocket firing. These are the interface between booster and Starship. So this is how every booster team knows they'll connect to Starship. They bolt onto the orbital launch table. And then Starship bolts onto the orbital launch table, and all the electronics connections, cooling connections, fueling connections are verified. This is the interface between the two. This is how they can test without waiting on each other. And this is a separate team entirely that owns the interface. And they do change it. And when they change it, Starship and Booster have to create adapters or upgrade, right, to meet the new interface. They don't hold the interface stagnant for forever. It would limit innovation. But they do time when they introduce changes to the interface so that Starship and Booster can adapt. Did I get anywhere near your point, or did I misunderstand your point?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great.
We have another question. There's actually three questions interconnected. So you showed us pretty much a steady state of a big company. My question is, how does it work when you start from a company which is very small, like let's say we are, and it's very difficult to define parallel lines of development and also interfaces between different teams. So how do you define teams, and how do you, let's say, take care of the communication with such small teams, like 5 people teams?
Sure. We actually do it with a game. It's called the product game, the modules game. And the modules game lets us attempt to create our first pass of what the modules could be. The module game walks us through this. Then we play a second game. There's 2 games together. So first is the modules games. What could be the modules of our next product increment? And then we play what's called the interfaces game. Of those possible modules, what are likely their inputs and outputs in software, hardware, electronics, etc., physically, chemically, basically from a finite element analysis and a computational fluid dynamics perspective, what are the likely inputs and outputs? So we play those 2 games, the product game, the modules game, the interfaces game. And these games aren't perfect, but they give us the envelope of possibilities. And then we try to build something and learn by building.
In case we would do a CustomDot workshop to do these 2 exercises, could we like customize it for CustomDot?
Oh yeah, of course. And I think CustomDot's around 14 people. For the class to be good, it's a minimum of 15 people. So if you brought in an intern or hired 1 more person or had a friend who's technically savvy come over, we'd get the 15 people, and yeah, we could do it.
2 people are joining in August, so that's not an issue.
Yeah, done. Easy. And it can go up to like 100 people. It's just, it's really much better if there's at least 15. So yeah, great.
So it's still not clear to me how it works, the communication between small teams. This because you mentioned that there are 3,000 teams of 5 people. How can they interact with?
Yeah. If teams share an interface, communication becomes super important, right? If you might have 10 teams all on different sides of the same interface, depending on what we're making, right? Or even more, but you have at least 2 or there wouldn't be an interface. How that works is physically, those teams attempt to work in the same room together. If you're remote, you use video chat and you're in breakout rooms with the same parent session. So for example, if you're in Zoom, you'd be in a mob, hopefully, with your team, and you'd be in a breakout room with your team, and you could go up to the parent session, the main room, anytime, which is the common room across all groups that share an interface. Hopefully you're doing physical work, because then it's way easier. You're just in the same room. So you have module A over in the northwest corner, module B in the northeast corner, etc. And the idea is to try to be within 3 meters of each other. And hopefully you have some test and production equipment. So you're actually doing development and not just talking about development. So you might have a production robot, some production chemistry, etc. So it's a little noisy. You might have rolling sound barriers or something like that, or white noise machines, but that's how it works. You try to be in a shared space if at all possible, because as soon as you're more than 3 meters away from a team that shares an interface, it's super easy for miscommunication to happen, even within one day. And that creates the highest risk for technical projects, which is integration risk, that the modules won't correctly work together when you put them together. So the way we attempt to reduce integration risk is by sharing a space.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. There's special meetings for this. There's things like Scrum of Scrums and Meta Scrum and big room planning. Those are all slow. It's much faster to be in the same space. But if for some reason you can't, then yes, it's slower, but you can introduce a set of coordination meetings. They do not work as well. I have done them. I've invented some of them. That is not my recommendation. That would be a last resort. And we are at time. If there are comments or questions later, that's awesome by me. I'll ask that Igor or any of you, well, if you don't mind, tweet at me at Joe Justice. That's a great way to do it. But if it's something sensitive, you can send it via email. Igor and I are already in email communication. That's absolutely fine. You could send a list of questions or comments anytime. I'd love it. Please do consider connecting with me on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter. I actually love that kind of thing, or Zing. I'm Joe Justice on all those things. Twitter is my most active. So if you tweet, that's a great way for us to be digital media friends. I'm happy to do the workshop later if that's what people want. I'm really glad I've had a chance to talk with you and hear some from you. The product that QustomDot is developing is game-changing and breakthrough. The trick is in doing the actual hardcore engineering so that it's available for stable product developments and product releases that meet a definition of done on shorter and shorter cadences. I mean, that's it. That is the actual entire product development game that makes a profitable company. So I'm cheering for you. You can reach out to me anytime. I think you're awesome. And thank you very much.
Thanks, John. Really cool. So Joy actually had a wedding last week, so I would like to use the moment to congratulate her. I hope you had a fun time. All right, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Take care, and thank you so much.
Right.
Bye.